Okay, welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Bigfoot Notes from the Field. We're having some issues. I and Bruce mentioned that Windows 10 is having problems with Google Chrome. So, Scott, if you have Windows 10 and are using Google Chrome, that might be why you're having trouble coming on. And Brian, you said you had to switch to Firefox to come on, so maybe that's what the answer is. So for those who haven't seen this, and this is in the recording, so I want this will be on the shows. I've started having T-shirts made. You know, it's funny. I look at this and everything is backwards. Maybe it's what it's supposed to be in my end. As long as it reads okay on your end,
it does. Yeah.
These are the Jevening Research T-shirts. That's the front over the left pocket. There isn't a pocket on that, and then this is on the back. These are really nice, heavy cotton T-shirts. So as we get rolling along here, I'd like to have these made. I'll find a producer to do those. You know, somebody that can make those in quantity, and I can send them out to our members. So, and of course, everybody's.
You should also put a Happy Meal on there and say, "Don't become a Happy Meal."
That's got to be a different shirt, you know. And I got to figure out a way to skirt around, the McDonald's copyrights on that. It'll have to be something off. Maybe I can get Shane Church, who does such. He did the underwear changing moment. Maybe I can get Shane to do a cartoon like that. That's off just enough where it implies, he kind of did that with the underwear changing thing too. So news-wise, that's kind of what's going on. And then you just asked about where are the glyphs, so Bigfoot can read the tree. Well, I don't know if we have any glyphs for our members for them to read them. So news-wise, I guess that's. I had just gotten that before I started tonight's blab too. I went out and checked the mail, and the mail was running late today, and there was this nice little package in the mailbox. So, other news, there isn't so much in the field right at the moment. We did have that situation we talked about last week, with the guy that was attacked in his house. Apparently, they're keeping a really tight lid on that because our people haven't been able to get any information on that one yet. So, and then Brian, you brought up about the show that I mentioned. I've only told a couple people. In fact, I told you and David that I spoke with Art Bell's producer yesterday or day before yesterday. We had a great talk. She wants me to come on. Now, it's still Art Bell's show, but Art's not doing the show. Apparently, somebody has been trying to kill him. Been shooting at his home. So he backed away, and now he's teaching her how to do it. Heather Wade is the producer / host of Midnight in the Desert, and on July 13th, I'll be the guest on that show, and it goes from around 9:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. So we're gonna spend 3 hours talking Bigfoot. So that'll be a lot of fun, and of course, David's going to post it on the website, and I'll announce it, beforehand, once the link is ready and everything. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's a lot of exposure. They have a lot of affiliates. That's, of course, regular. And I think they're satellite radio, too. So, Art Bell did AM Coast to Coast for many years, and he was always my favorite talk show host. So I remember being at work at night. I worked graveyard in the mid-'90s and used to listen to his show every night. So, Bruce is asking, where are things at with ladies having vocalizations here in the Pacific Northwest? I believe Milo was on the case. Yeah, Milo has been over there working. In fact, I was waiting to see if Milo was going to come on tonight. Haven't heard from him. So he was going to be going over to Brandy's. That's her name. Apparently where the bedding sites are, they keep getting bigger, so there's a lot more activity going on there. I know she's been doing a lot more recording of vocals, so I'm kind of waiting to hear what's going on with that investigation. Our team in Northern Washington is out looking into some recent stuff going on there too. So, I'm kind of sitting waiting to hear from the teams. They're in active investigations right now. So, and actually, they're a little bit worried on that one with Brandy because the Sasquatches have been coming up closer and closer to the house, and they've been a little concerned with that because they're getting so bold. And I gave them some tips, things to do to get them to sort of keep at bay, and they've been implementing those. So mostly right now with the motion sensor lights and things like that, and cutting the brush back away from the house. So hopefully we'll get some updates on that. So anything that new, we're supposed to be talking about, and I wanted to bring the subject up. I get some strange messages from people once in a while. Some are good, some aren't good, some are helpful, some aren't. And what prompted tonight's discussion was one of these. There was a person who some people are almost insistent because they think they figured out what Bigfoot is, and I get occasionally, it's not a lot, thankfully it's not a lot. Once in a great while I'll get somebody who'll email me and they'll say, I know what Bigfoot is, then they'll start doing things like quoting biblical scripture and things like that. And I think in their minds they may have figured out the mystery, but in reality, that's little or no help. So, when we talk about, when I put the show title, Bigfoot is what, with a question mark, these people are implying that they're either, some sort of,
extraterrestrial or
extraterrestrial or pre-creation by God, of humans or some other thing, instead of just looking at the most simplistic, simple is good. The old saying, the old KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. That's usually the best way or the most accurate in terms of explaining what something is. And I did a bunch of work today. I was looking at all this stuff. I printed all this stuff out about how animals are classified and how they're grouped. And I was actually hoping to get a couple of the professionals that are part of our group, to talk to me about this, but they're really busy right now, all the people we have. So I lucked out on that one by not getting, I guess, the input. But so I went and did a little research to be certain that I was right on track with this. And people need to understand that when an animal is classified into a major grouping, and of course, there's the major groupings. And I'll just, there's seven areas that let me see. Just in classifying animals, science puts every living thing into seven major groupings, and from largest to smallest, it goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And when it comes to things like primates, and I've heard people, exactly, Bruce says, unfortunately, some people just keep it stupid. Yeah, I mean, that's right. But when classifying something, it boils down to, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it sounds like a duck, it's a duck, right? You can't look at, I guess the best way to look at it is if you take something like horses, okay, the horse family, and there you got horses, donkeys, zebras, anything that basically looks like a horse has the same general appearance and characteristics. They're all lumped into the horse family. And then of course there's, different species. Oh, looks like Scott's trying to call in again. Let's bring him on. So when it comes to something like the Sasquatch, okay, then we're talking about a primate because they exhibit all the same characteristics that all the other primates have. And I won't go into all the scientific stuff that, Scott's still having trouble. When it comes to all the different, and it's really difficult to look. You look online for all this information. That's why I was hoping to get Mark Dobbs to give me the kind of the simple explanation, but I didn't get a hold of Mark in time to get any information from him. So, but when in terms of general morphological similarities, and you look at all the different apes and other primates and humans, we all share very similar physical characteristics, and that's how we're lumped into the grouping of primates. And even science primatologists and all those people today are they're still having their difficulties when it comes to, what belongs where. It's a constant shuffle, it seems like, among. Oh, there's Scott. I think you made it. Hey, Scott, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
It took a little bit of doing, but you made it. We can hear you just fine.
Yeah, that was not easy.
What did you have to do finally to get on?
Holy cow. I don't know. I created about 7 different accounts with 7 things I've never heard of before. So,
do you have Windows 10?
I don't know. I'm on my phone. It's
oh, you're on your phone.
Yeah. Somehow I made it.
Yeah, phones. I don't know what it is with cell phones. Seem to be very difficult with Blab sometimes. But you made it, so congratulations. You're one of the few that has done that with their phone.
And it was totally by accident, I'm sure.
So what we're into talking about, I don't know if you've heard any of it. I was telling Brian that I get some weird messages sometimes. Of course, once you get just a little bit of notoriety, I have just a little bit. People will email me stuff, and most of the time it's pretty good stuff, very helpful information. Once in a great while, you get a Lulu that's come in from left field, and that's what prompted this discussion tonight. Was somebody was very insistent on giving me this information. They knew what Bigfoot was, and then started sending this stuff from biblical scripture, which was nice and everything, but really of no value when it comes to these creatures. And so when you want to figure out what something is, you really have to get in, take a grounded approach and looking at, how scientists classify different animals into groupings and species and so on. And a lot of it's done by morphological or physical characteristics. In other words, they take all the creatures that look similar, and we were just saying, like the horse family, for instance. There's all the various types of creatures, zebras, donkeys, horses, and such, that fit into the horse family. Oh, Bruce says, what, Bigfoot is not Esau or Nephilim? And that's spot on to what was sent to me. They were, quoting Esau and all this stuff, and I'm really, to be honest, not interested in that stuff. It doesn't do us anything. And of course, our goal is actually going out, learning about these creatures, and then, later on, it's for science to figure out where they fall into place. But for our purposes, we can clearly state that they're a primate because they share all the same characteristics. And in my reading, some of the things like fingernails, what makes something a primate, are fingernails instead of claws, and that's kind of a big thing in terms of characteristics. And from having seen at least the feet of Sasquatches on my first occasion, I can tell you they have fingernails, or at least toenails, very similar to our own. So it's that things like that place them. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. The trunk of the body is very similar to ours. But that doesn't, just because they're primates doesn't mean that they're Homo sapiens. Even Neanderthals were not human per se. They were Homo neanderthalensis, which is a separate species from Homo sapiens. So the Sasquatch is very likely, I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't know, we can't prove this for sure. They're probably a hominid, which means they're in the same family grouping that we are, but it still doesn't make them human. They're not Homo sapiens. And just the physical characteristics alone, bear that out, because they're structurally actually quite a lot different than we are. Probably more differences between us and them physically than there are between us and, say, gorillas and chimps. So that's my explanation. Any thoughts on that, fellas?
Well, Will, is maybe switching subjects a tad, but the whole thing about how they're from outer space and everything, is that where the whole like time loss things, you think that's where that came from? Because everybody talks about, oh, well, all of a sudden it was 4 hours later or something like that,
There's one of actually. Well, there was an account where that came up, and I haven't really heard that on time loss. except on one specific story that was told to me that I didn't investigate for about a year or so, and then found out that it was fake, and found out that one originally was going to be a UFO encounter, not a Bigfoot encounter, but it evolved that way, and you know what I'm talking about. I think if people say that today, now there could be in terms of them being shook up or having some stress that's been induced from an encounter, they could lose a little bit of time just by simply being disoriented, or there is something called tachypsyche, and police and military know all about this because a person's body undergoes a great deal of stress, in life-threatening situations and such, or a situation caused. Now, obviously, if you walk up on something that weighs 800 to 1,000 pounds, and is this massive creature that's going to give you an underwear changing moment or two, that could bring on enough psychological stress to cause this, and that does actually it plays with time and perception and things like that in a person. So that could account for some. I think a lot of times people, if they're doing that, maybe they're imagining things or they're just disoriented. I don't think there's any, and people, and then of course there's the, the interdimensional folks and stuff like that, which I think is just absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
I think these people, they have their issues with, their portals, they're interdimensional, when they're shape-shifting.
Yeah.
All the other nonsense. They're going to be bringing that up into any topic that they feel that's. Well,
what they're trying to do, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I see where you're. That's a great point. What a lot of people do, and in this subject especially, is they try to bend what information is out there to fit their view instead of taking the facts and seeing what theory they can develop based on facts and evidence and seeing where that leads, which is how it's supposed to be done. Instead of, like Bruce brings up, seems to be a big controversy, Pongid versus hominid person. I think Bigfoot is a separate branch in the evolutionary bush. Yeah, I mean, and even now I was reading today, some stuff about, from primatology, where we fit on all that is still, and there's a lot of flux going on, and they think that there's some stuff about, gorillas and us being more separate from chimps, and scientists are always changing their minds. Of course, some of it's based on, using DNA now, but, so there's the, it is going to be its own. It's going to be its own species. It's probably going to be, maybe it's probably its own genus, and I was thinking earlier, you guys remember back in the 60s and 70s, they made some movies. They were kind of, I think even in the 50s, some cheap B-grade horror movies were about troglodytes and stuff. And troglodyte was actually one of the terms that was used in regards to these creatures, not just Sasquatch, but, the Yeti and things like that back in those days. And it goes all the way back to the 1930s. I think one of the first terms was pan-troglodyte or something like that. But, and I can't remember, I was going to look that up and I forgot to see what it actually means. But it's sort of and those terms are descriptive of what species they're talking about. So, but yeah, Pat, Scott, you bring that up about how these people, how they sort of apply these things or where these thoughts came from. And I think it's more, they're using stuff to support their own way of thinking instead of, what will logically lead us to what these things actually are. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah. And Will, on that note too, I think that that a lot of times some of these people really are sincere and they're just kind of fitting to what they see into their own beliefs. And then other times we know that they're just out to make money, right? They're just making these stories up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sell books and things like that, with these crazy extraterrestrial theories and stuff like that,
Oh yeah. The mind speaking and all that crazy stuff, that stuff, really dry. When we first came on, we were talking about the news, and Scott, I don't know if you heard, I'm going to be going on. It's actually Art Bell's show on the 13th of July here. He doesn't do the show now. He's actually coaching his producer. She's doing the show, Heather Wade. She was telling me, I heard from her some time ago, and then she said around December, somebody had been around Art's home actually shooting at his home. And he caught somebody outside the home one night, and there's just a series of things going on. So he actually got fairly frightened by all this stuff, and he decided to back away from doing the show himself. So now he's coaching his producer to do the show. But anyway, I'm going on that show for 3 hours that evening, and we had actually a very long conversation the other day, and she is one of the bright spots when it comes to media producers / hosts that aren't interested in all this nonsensical approach to anything that I hate to use the term Bigfoot and paranormal, but in some of these, I guess you'd say, esoteric subjects, she's interested in taking a nuts and bolts approach to them and getting away from all this nonsense. So which kind of bugs me with the media sometimes, because, and I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, a producer from the Sci-Fi Channel contacted me and wanted me to do a show that was called, and it was a short-lived show, it was called Joe Rogan Questions Everything. So, and I after chatting with him, I agreed, and they flew me down to Burbank. And it was funny because they told me how to dress. I thought I was going to be in a studio being questioned, so I dressed appropriately for that. Similar, in kind of a suit and everything like I did for America's Book of Secrets. Well, instead of that, they drove me out to the Angeles mountain ranges, and it was hot and dusty out in the middle of nowhere. So, I'm peeling clothes off as we're going out there, and nobody seemed to be coordinated. Then Joe Rogan wanted to take a hike with the whole crew down through this wooded area, for an appropriate backdrop. And then we proceeded to talk for more than 2 hours on camera. And he was just throwing questions at me left and right. And I was batting them right back at him. And by the end of that, he really enjoyed talking to me and liked my approach. But they chose not to use my segment for the show. And if you guys have ever seen that particular show, it's the local Billy Bobs, well, I think I heard something out there, and they're out beating on trees and stuff like that. And it was completely ridiculous. So, thank goodness I wasn't included on that part of that show. But, a lot of media sources, that seems to be what they prefer these days. That's why shows like Finding Bigfoot are on, that's, you get, the only thing the only reason that show is still on is because people like hearing the witnesses. When it comes to the second part where they're out doing their silliness, I think everybody laughs about that. Bruce is saying, you hear hunters say that they couldn't shoot Bigfoot because they look too human. But on the other hand, we hear gorilla-like behaviors like bluff charges and chest something. Yeah, that's true. And I think when it comes to people's perceptions are funny when it comes to these things. And I suppose you could, if you question people, at a zoo, say took a survey of 100 people at a zoo looking at chimps or gorillas or whatever, you would get a whole range of perception where some people would probably use the same thing. They look very human, they act human, and some would say, no, they're very, the opposite of that. So I think when it comes to these things, sometimes it's a lot of it's perception, and in people's frame of reference, whatever tools they have in their frame of reference is how they relate an encounter to an investigator. So, if they don't know much about the subject, or whatever their personal beliefs are, or their outlook on life, things like that, all that affects how they relate what they saw. And a lot of people, I'll give you an example. He said some people say they look too human. My now deceased friend Bobby Short, when she had a sighting, she related it to me. It looked very human to her. Well, Bobby was a nurse, so maybe that tells me that either that was the way she perceived it, maybe read a little too much into it, or she was seeing the type 4 that is closer to humans physically, in terms of the particulars. They don't have hair in their face, things like that. Their arms are more proportionate to humans than the other 3 types are, things like that. So it was one of those 2 things. Now, I can tell you, Lindsay, I don't know if he's on here listening or not, but Lindsay, one of our members in Canada, is a big game hunter. He actually had one of these things in these sites. Now, Lindsay has some very expensive equipment. He has a gun sight that also acts as a camera. He didn't film the one he had in these sites, but he saw it very clearly, and he says, no, it did not look human to him. So I think it's a lot of times it's a matter of how that person interprets what it is they see, in terms of how they describe it. So,
yeah, getting back to these silly shows that you're talking about, and podcasts, and and YouTube videos and all that.
Oh yeah.
When I'll be sitting there listening to something, and it's got me interested for the first 5-10 minutes.
Right.
And then as soon as it shifts and we're off to the next dimension,
off to La La Land somewhere.
It just, yeah, I mean, that's when you just lose it, and time to turn the channel. And when you do get a show on, they pick the most ridiculous people, and I shouldn't say ridiculous, but the most far-fetched, and it's almost like they're trying to make a mockery out of it. Their goal is, that the people producing the show don't believe it's real, so they have no intention in making a wholehearted attempt to make the topic look real. So you have these people that they come in, like you said, Billy Bob out there, and they got, there's 4 of them, and they got 2 teeth between them, and it's just, it's just crazy, and then you try to sit there and you watch it with someone who you're trying to get interested in the topic, right, and they just can't get past the hillbillies or the nonsense of it all. I mean, not even just hillbillies, but it's just, there's not a really good approach to the subject without making a mockery somehow of it.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely correct. That's been my experience with television and radio people, who've contacted me. Now, I will have to say the History Channel tried to do a great job. They didn't know anything about the subject of Bigfoot when they approached me, for the America's Book of Secrets. People always want to call when I'm on. No, that's okay. Turn that off. When America's Book of Secrets people from the History Channel contacted me, they really had no idea. And I think that's a lot of times with television producers and radio people is they really don't know the topic. So, they go online, they look, and they see who's out there, see who gets a lot of attention, and that's the people they sort of gravitate to, especially if they have, what they think might look interesting to an audience. When they contacted me, the producers asked me about a number of people, and I was instantly, going into gag reflex because they were going to approach some really horrible people on the subject with really garbage information, some of this mind speak stuff. So I proceeded to go down the list and explain about each of these people. And it sort of changed their whole attitude. So then they were asking me who I would recommend and why. So, and of course they'd already chosen a few people. So I wasn't able to give too much input as far as, recommending anybody, but, but they tried to do a good job, and they tried to treat the subject well. So it was one of the few times that, I was able to give some input. Now, because, we've been sort of pushing this line to try to do, to take a more scientific approach to the topic. And I've been recommending especially to our people, that we do a combination of archaeology and police criminal investigation techniques. And the combination really works well. Mostly when we're on site, we find something. And a lot of people, when they present evidence, especially on Facebook, places like that, which is really a really horrible place to do that, because it tells me they're just looking for attention and not so much, sharing what it is they find. But in terms of doing real quality work, if we adopt some of the methodology that criminologists use when they go on site, then what we collect can be passed on. We sort of have a much better chain of custody, if you will, from information being collected by people in the field going to our scientists who can actually do something with that, as opposed to, say, somebody going out and say, well, I've seen this in the field myself. Somebody that goes along with our teams, a prospective member, and I can think of someone very specifically back in the 90s from Portland, Oregon, who created a Bigfoot called Blader, going up and picking hair off trees with his hands and stuffing it in his pocket like this. Well, any integrity of the data is gone right there. So, Bruce says,
I can,
go ahead.
I can tell you, even from a different perspective. Now, I'm from upstate New York. Mm-hmm. We're right in the foothills of the Adirondacks.
You're up with Jeremiah.
Yeah, not as far as him. He's up. I'm to the south of he's in the northern Adirondacks, where I'd be down in the southern. We're about 25 miles northwest of Albany.
Okay.
And I recently got acquainted with Brian Gosselin from Whitehall fame, the Whitehall case, the famous Whitehall case back in the 70s. Sure. And he was one of the policemen that were on duty in the heart of all that, that big scene back then. And I got to spend a weekend with him, actually, and listening to his story. And they had Finding Bigfoot, and they had, other, it might have been Monster Quest. I'm not sure. A couple of them, they had him on. And he even said how by the time it was done, I mean, they had him looking like a 1930s cop. Portrayed him. He goes, I walked out there looking like Barney Fife. That's just what he said. I mean, yeah. And then now here's the guy, you know what I mean? That his story hasn't wavered in 40 years, 76. Yeah. So, and he tells the story the same as it is, went down and, back in those days. And, he's just basically left him with a bad taste in his mouth about the whole thing. There's a humble guy and, who's, just tells his story to anyone who will listen, and it even, he felt it made him look foolish, and all he did was, retell his story, but they jazzed it up to the point where it looked ridiculous.
And I think a lot of times that is done on purpose.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it keeps a lot of witnesses quiet.
Well, it does, because it just and unintentionally, intentionally ruining your reputation. For whatever, and like you said, if they made him look like that, and I had an encounter, do I even out there and put my reputation on the line, and look like a flaming idiot?
Yeah,
as well,
absolutely.
Because if these quote Bigfoot shows that are so dedicated to the topic are going to make him look like that, it's just it's kind of disheartening, really.
I ran into that with newspapers years ago, where a reporter would be excited to hear what you were doing in the field or whatever, and then they would change it. They would add things to it, silly things. And somebody told me after that, they said, well, if you talk to newspaper reporters, give them a written statement, because they can't deviate from that. And you hate to have to do that. You like to talk to people, when they seem interested, but when they change your words around or make you look stupid when that wasn't the impression they give you during an interview, then it does put a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, Will, to what you were just saying, and to Scott's point, didn't you say one time, or didn't you have research that indicated, maybe for Mr. Black or something, that for every one person that does come forward, there's probably at least 5 that don't, or something like that? Because they don't want to look stupid.
From my own field work, when we were doing a lot of the investigation of the South Mount St. Helens area from 1986 through 98, I talked to a lot of folks in that region during those years, and I easily estimated that probably for every one person there were at least 10 people that had encounters that would never talk about them. And that was a lot of times from witnesses. I'd get a witness and they knew of so many people, in those local areas that had seen things, like the Yackhold area, for instance. There were many, I'd say many dozens of people. I couldn't even give you a number. There were so many people that I did talk to who knew many more people who had seen things that would never talk about it. Yeah. I couldn't even begin to approach them.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was because of the silliness factor. They would see a few things, and back in those days, it was primarily newspaper. So if they thought they were going to, have to endure some kind of ridicule, they simply wouldn't talk about it. It was easier just to not deal with it. Yeah,
especially if you're an authority figure like a police officer. You definitely can't say anything because your job could be on the line.
Right? Oh, absolutely. When I met Mark Pittenger, the state trooper, back in 1975, he was a pretty tough cop, and he was really given a lot of crap by his coworkers, fellow state troopers over all that. But him being the guy that he was, he dealt with it. He didn't like it, but he dealt with it, but because he knew what he saw. So
it was like Whitehall, talking with Brian Goslin, the Whitehall incident up there. They local Whitehall police, they had New York state troopers. There was a deputy, it might have been as well. Well, when it was all said and done, the trooper that he was out in the field with, the incident took place, and he says to him, he goes, "Now tell me what you saw." And the state trooper goes, "I didn't say nothing. I didn't see a thing." And his hand was shaking like a leaf to say anything.
Right.
Well, about a week or so after it all kind of calmed down, they, by upper management and the sheriff's department, there, going to squash this, and you don't say any more about it. Don't even bring it up. If questions are asked, deter the questions the best you can. Don't even keep this thing going. They wanted to squash it. Now, if that were to happen now, it seems like it would almost, because Whitehall now is famous because of that. So sure. Revenue, they want to get as much as they can now. But at least that's what he told me, what they dealt with back, back in the mid 70s. They were basically told, in no certain terms, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, I think it's that way in a lot of places, even to this day.
Right. Hey, Will, and actually, it's kind of funny because I'm just at the point in doing the screenplay where you get a phone call, you're back from the military, and you get a phone call from Charlie, and he tells a story about those elk that had gotten ripped apart or something, and he basically didn't want to say anything because he would have gotten in trouble. This wasn't his. Yeah,
that was interesting. I'll bring that up a little bit. Charlie was one of these guys. I only remember him having 2, maybe 3 regular jobs. Joe's here. We start the show. Charlie worked for the National Park Service at Mount Rainier when I was little, and he really loved that job. That's why in Notes in the Field, I dedicated the book to him using that picture, because I think that was taken about. Hey, Joe.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
That picture was taken about the time he worked for the Park Service. So that was the image, Charlie running a chainsaw. But after that, he only had a job one time in the late 60s at a place where they made laminate beams, and that lasted, a few months. And then the last few years of his life, he worked guarding logging equipment for a company and actually got a pension from that. But, was living in a trailer on site. So that was Charlie. He lived out in the forest and he lived off the forest. So during that time period from actually he lived with a woman in a house that was rented from Burlington Northern had a 99-year lease on this little cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And he would tap into the power lines. Charlie had only had an 8th grade education, but he was a genius. He knew how to do things. He was able to tap into the Puget Power electric lines, and they could never figure out where the power was going. They could never figure out how he was doing it. He'd see a truck coming in, or whatever, and he would disconnect whatever line he had, and then when they were gone, he'd go hook it back up. But they were unable to trace how he did that. So when this incident with the elk happened, he told me, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a fishing game official that he knew from the area that came to visit him up this road. And he lived way out the end of this road near the town of Wilkinson. So the guy asked him, he says, well, have you heard any strange animal noises up here lately, any screams or anything? And immediately, because of knowing me and what I had seen and stuff, and by this time, I was pretty well involved in the subject. He played dumb just to see what the guy would tell him. And the guy told him, he says there were some mushroom pickers up on the flats that had found a couple elk that were torn apart. And he showed him, he already had a copy of the written report. And he said in the written report, it said that they were dismembered without the use of tools. Yeah. And then this official told him, he says, look, you can't talk about this to anybody. If you do, Puget Power is going to find out where their electricity has been going. He says, you catch my meaning. And, of course, it could have landed him in jail and all this stuff. So that was a pretty open threat to keep his mouth shut about what happened. And in the report, it mentioned the word Bigfoot and things like that. So they knew exactly what it was. Then the guy left. So Charlie never had a phone other than the last time I remember, like I said, it was in the 1960s. So for him to go find a phone and to try to call me. And in those days, it was a crapshoot trying to get me because I was stationed in Fort Lewis, and I just happened to be at my parents' house that particular evening. So he called there, I guess, trying to find out how to get a hold of me, and I was there, so I answered the phone, and he says, hey, you need to come up here right away. I got something to talk to you about. So for him to go to that effort to call me and to say I need to get up there right away was a big deal, because he never did that. So I drove up there, and he told me, and I had my 357 at the time on me, so I drove up to where it happened. I knew the place because we built the roads when I was a teenager, cutting cedar shake bolts up there. So I knew exactly where this took place. And when I got there, there was still blood up there. I found Sasquatch tracks all over the place. Even sent pictures to John Green, and he wrote back and said, yeah, those are pretty good tracks. And that was it from him. So, but in terms of, the official saying, putting a lid on it, absolutely they did. They squashed that right away, and they knew exactly what did it.
Yeah. And actually, going back to kind of switching topics a little bit, going to
sure, it's what we do.
Yeah, I think JRG brought up a great point earlier about cognitive perception, and about how you were talking earlier about how two witnesses can see the same thing but see something different. Like, have you guys ever seen, like, there's like a famous image of it's called a duck rabbit, where it's like some people see a duck, some people see a rabbit. It's the same exact image though. Yeah. Or there's another one where there's like an Egyptian woman looking forward, but it also looks like two women looking side by side at each other. Right. So it's like the same image, but people see different things a lot of times. They see different things.
And that's the whole part of this thing. I mean, and especially because these encounters don't last more than moments usually. It's extremely unusual for a Sasquatch encounter to last more than just a couple of minutes. So in that short of amount of time, you're taking all this information in, then you try to make sense of it. And you're exactly right, Brian. If they might see, one person might see one thing, the next person might see something else, a third person might see something yet again, but they're all looking at the same thing.
Right.
I couldn't imagine how my mind would even process something like that. I wouldn't even begin until it ever did happen.
The only thing that went through my mind was, what through my mind was, oh shit. I mean, that's it. You walk in on something like that, and it's like, holy crap. I mean, you just everything stops. It comes to an absolute standstill. I mean, it seems like time freezes. It doesn't really. Where Brian, you brought that up about people saying they have missing time. Well, that's horse crap. I mean, I think for the most part, it's a perceptual thing. It seems like it. And time may actually perceptually slow down a little bit, but it's just because you're in kind of a state of shock in a way, because that encounter assaults your system. You're thinking everything you think comes to a grinding halt all of a sudden, and in my case, I was kind of frozen, and then what got me going was actually the other one coming around from behind me. That sort of, I don't know how, if I would have stood there longer had that one not. I probably would have a little bit longer, but since the other one came around from behind me, that kind of shocked me into saying, to myself, I need to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, just like, I keep referring back to Ryan Gosling there. Same thing. He said a million things went through. I mean, here's a trained police officer. And he said a million things went through my mind. He said, when you see your life flashes, he goes, it just happened so fast, and your mind can't comprehend when you're something that's not supposed to exist is standing in front of you, 10, 15 feet away, and
you don't know how to react to it.
You can't take it in like that. You just can't wrap your head around something like that. I can only imagine. I can't imagine.
I'm going to show Joe I got to show you this real quick. I had these made, or this one. This is a prototype. This is the front pocket. These T-shirts.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I like that.
So as I'm able to, this is the prototype. I'm going to have those made for our members. So
okay.
I had to show that to you, though.
That's good. I like that. I'll get one for sure.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it really is a perceptual thing, and it kind of goes along with this whole thing. The topic of what a Sasquatch is. Where people think that they're something from biblical times or allegories or whatever, and it's all a matter of perception. And like was brought up earlier, Bruce brought up people anthropomorphize animals. In other words, it's we place human traits and characteristics on non-human species. That's the definition of it. And everybody, they're used to doing it to their dogs and cats and birds and things like that. So, when they do it to a Sasquatch, I guess we should expect it, but it's really misplaced, opinions, and a lot of these are nothing but opinions that are out there.
Right. So the people out there that are, the fuzzy forest people, and they want to cohabitate with them and all this crap. I mean, they would. I mean, if it was a 600-pound grizzly bear standing in your backyard, you wouldn't be baking it a pie. So why would?
Hello, exactly, and that's just like
it,
and that's what. Yeah, that's what happened to the guys.
I just don't understand, because they look somewhat human. They have a few characteristics because they walk on two legs. Well, that doesn't mean that you have them over for dinner.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the point, that I've been trying to make to people is, just because they remotely resemble us, and I mean remotely, because they don't, and all these people that want to call them human, there is nothing human about them. Because they stand up and walk on two legs, that doesn't make you a human being. There's all the physical characteristics put them far closer, to an ape genus than they do what we are. We're something very unusual when it comes to primates. These things are much more closely resemble both, living and extinct species of other non-human primates. So why people want to keep placing, these silly ideals on these creatures when they don't fit that paradigm at all.
Yeah, then the thing about them being friendly and wanted to go out there and pet them. Basically, you know, you look on YouTube, you can see where bears walk right by a person.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't mean that bear says, "Hey, come follow me." You know.
No.
Yeah. Let's go play in the forest. You know?
Well, and even in places like Yellowstone, they had to bar people from feeding bears because then they'd start expecting the food and tearing cars apart and things like that. So that changes behaviors. And it's well known, especially in the southern part of the country, that if you feed these things and then stop feeding them, they get ticked off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And Will, too, another thing going back to cognitive perception, there's a theory that I do place some truth in here in Florida. I supposedly back in like I don't know how long ago, how many decades ago, but a lot of people down in South Florida used to have like chimpanzees as pets.
Oh, right.
And they think that in orangutans, and they think that a lot of them may have escaped or that they were just released, whatever. And some of the Bigfoot sightings that come out down here in Florida, they might actually be like escaped chimpanzees. And It's not that necessarily the witnesses are wrong, but it's just that their perception
it's a misidentification. Well, you know, especially, you know, and people like to give credit to the show Finding Bigfoot and some of the other ones for, you know, even though they're not good shows, that they raise awareness in the public. Well, that's a double-edged sword. The other side of that is if they see something that they're not familiar with, then automatically they jump to the conclusion it was Bigfoot when it was something else, you know, and instead of taking the approach, well, let's figure out what it was or wasn't, you know, rule everything else out first, then we might be able to speculate, okay, maybe it was this, but then is there any evidence to support that claim?
And context, too, going back to context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With their escaped chimpanzee that just happened to grow to 7.5 foot tall, 700 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
and that also goes back to that perception thing. That's also that perceptual thing. I mean, if you saw something, I understand that a lot of people are afraid, but at some point, you know, go back and take a measurement. You know, I mean, there's lots of trees and things you could figure out. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I guessed it was this tall because it was by this branch," and I went up and held my arm up. Well, take a tape measure out, measure that. You know, was it the height that you thought it was? You know, I encourage people to try to get a little bit of, you know, some hard information to go with a sighting because, you know, I can say the two that I saw. The first one, I estimated it was 8 feet because it was about 2 feet or so above my height, and I was fairly close, you know, roughly 15 feet away from it. And I was about 5'9", 5'10" at the age of 16, so I think my guess was pretty close in terms of height. There used to be, I know in John Napier's book, Bigfoot, he had and he was an anthropologist from England. He had a formula. You could take footprint dimensions and figure out basically the height of a Sasquatch. And I think generally it was probably pretty close with that. I mean, because you get some differences from individual to individual, of course, but for the most part, it's probably fairly accurate. But absolutely, in terms of if you see something walk by an object, you know, where you can take a measurement from the ground up to that point where you saw the top of its head, then you might be able to get a pretty good idea of a height measurement. Weight's a little different. That's subjective, of course, but there's things we can do. I mean, you know, instead of just, you know, the swag method and opinions, that's what's out there. I mean, people guess. There's guesses and opinions. That's the majority of what's floating around out there, and it really drives me crazy sometimes.
Yep.
Hey, Will, Coyote Man had a great question in the chat board a little while ago. What would Mr. Black answer the question, or how would Mr. Black answer the question, the Sasquatch is a what?
Well, we've talked a little bit about that, but he's actually trying to get the scientists that he knows to talk to me to give me more of a direct answer on that. So I'm still kind of waiting. I've been waiting for a while. You know, some of these people are very reticent about talking, you know, that were part of that effort. I don't know if it was because he's never really told me that it had the group had a specific name or anything like that. I think it was a very hush-hush type of thing, and they keep a real tight lid on things. So, but he's recently found the guy, and he's trying to get him to talk to me about this. So I don't really have an explanation from them yet. I do know from, of course, we talked before last week and before that about the DNA test that was done, from the kid with the bicycle, and what that came back, and that was a full spectrum DNA analysis, and it only came back unknown primate. And that's really the closest they're going to get at this point. Now, what the guys did dissecting, I'm sure they had a much more detailed. Yeah, exactly. Nothing to compare it to. And that's kind of the big thing. There really isn't anything. Everybody thinks DNA is a magic bullet, and it's really not. It is in a lot of ways for us because we have put so much study and effort into it on human beings. But there's, some people study certain animal species, and there's more work on those animal species. But when it comes to the whole animal kingdom, you can't just plug some unknown DNA into the system and it'll pop out with a magic answer. It doesn't work that way. You got to be able to compare these things to known samples. So the closest thing it came up with was unknown primate.
So now, for instance, for that one sample there of DNA that came up as unknown primate, I mean, would you hold that sample in a controlled environment until you can get another sample from somewhere else to match to that one, or does that sequence get thrown away? I mean, is there any samples of this unknown primate that are, say, in this refrigerator, and then you get another one that maybe you can compare to that one? Because there has to be a starting point. It's got to have the original one to begin with. So
exactly, and if we are able to, with the GRG here in the future, able to do that, then absolutely, that's what we'll do. We'll build up. You have our anthropologist to do something just like that, to create some kind of a system where we're collecting this stuff. I'm sure that the powers that be already have this, of course. They're way ahead of us on any of this stuff. I mean, they know all about these things. So, and I've only gotten pieces of that information, enough to actually able to go in the field and lead our teams to where we can get what we need from this. But, and I can't talk too much about what they have and what they're doing. I have to think about how to say those things, because I don't want to expose them, because they're okay with us using the information as long as they don't get the exposure as a result of it, if you know what I mean. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been attracting more professional people, anthropologists, and we have one person. I don't want to say too much about him because he was a cancer researcher. Now he's in medical school. He's helping a great deal when it comes to the scientific part of it, in terms of helping us with information and stuff. But and he'll be a great asset along with our anthropologist. So and that's our part, as field people, to go out and collect the stuff properly, so that we can pass it on to them and they can make some sense out of it and actually catalog this stuff. And maybe we'll actually get somewhere with that.
Answer my question. I mean, in your opinion, okay, we do get a sample out, right, and it's confirmed. We have several samples matching country, south, out your way, east coast, this whatever, and they all come up to this unknown. Then what? I mean, that satisfies our general curiosity, but then they broadcast that out. I mean, does it on your local news? It hit the news that it comes up on ABC News. In other news tonight, we found that several samples for Bigfoot or Sasquatch have been confirmed an unknown primate. I mean, it's still going to take the body for most people to see it.
It will,
laid on a slab. I mean, because it just seems like, and not that it really matters. I mean, to me or you or probably anybody who's really genuinely involved in this, who knows that they exist. Right. But it's still going to take, for the average American, or average citizen, even American, but average citizen, they're going to want something more than just a piece of paper saying confirmed DNA.
They're going to want one on the slab, absolutely. And I know there's people that'll go kicking and screaming about that, but that's the reality. And like our anthropologist Mark Dobbs said, he said that's the way science and scientists do things. It's not just not out of the question. It's a matter of regular practice. He says taking a member of a species, like this, is something they routinely do. So I don't see the scientific community having a problem with it. And I think if we were able to accomplish that, I don't think we'd have to worry much about it, because the scientific community would be all over it, and of course they would support that.
And of course, I'm not suggesting some kind of mass cover-up necessarily, but
right.
there's economic reasons why those in power wouldn't want those things exposed, right? Mm-hmm. Because it would have tremendous effect on the forestry industry and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean we could go down that whole train of thought too. There's with the Endangered Species Act. Of course, the Endangered Species Act would kick in automatically once the scientific community recognized there being something out there. Then immediately, and it's not something that they have to go out and do it. It's an automatic thing. It happens automatically. And of course, they spend years putting their panel of experts, all these various experts together to do the study and figure out the impacts on the environment, all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it would be years. But then the economic impact, like you say, if it were logging, or even in terms of recreational use of these regions where these things are, they may have to shut a lot of that land down, because it would be such a major find that they would have to shut everything down just to figure this all out. And of course, I know they already know this stuff, but publicly they would have to go through all these, jump through all these hoops for the public benefit and everything. And it's probably would be more designed to kind of readjust where things are, so people aren't out running around and becoming Happy Meals. And that's another thing too. I mean, if it came about where, it was shown that they did know about this stuff, and a lot of people are taken by these things, it's a big liability issue. So, and that's one of the reasons that I would never give my sources away, because I think they're doing an important job with that. They have a lot on their shoulders, and they're really not in control with it. So I know that these things routinely run circles around those folks. So they have an extremely difficult job. It's like the case, with our cop buddy told us about last week. They've got an extremely tight lid on that situation right now. And even people like Mr. Black are having some difficulties finding out what's going on. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that. But it's got to be a bad situation for it to be this quiet.
Do you see we'll say in the next 10 years or foreseeable future, this being exposed? I mean, where it comes out and it's finally, I don't want to say legitimized, but broadly recognized. Do you see that coming in the foreseeable future?
If this group of people here with the JRG, if we're able to continue what we're doing, it'll happen. I really believe that, because we're sort of the force against the nonsense out there. If we can get rid of a lot of the nonsensical junk that's out there, and it is starting to happen, and because our numbers are growing, and this outlook, and even some of the media personalities like our Bill show, the producer I spoke with, she's now hosting, is taking that approach. The nonsensical approach stuff is out the window. Now everybody's interested in this stuff being legitimized and doing it correctly in terms of evidence collecting, how it's presented and talked about and such. If we can continue this kind of a wave, it'll happen. This stuff will come out. It'll be recognized legitimately, or at least discussed that way and approached that way. If we can accomplish that, I think we'll have done a lot.
Did you see? It was recently on one of the late night shows, and I can't remember which one, but they had that Playboy Playmate was on, and years ago when they were in the redwoods and out there.
I remember when that happened
in front of their bus there, and they actually videotaped a fleeting glance. I mean, now to me, in her mind, they and the people that were there really believed it was something. But the talk show host, I mean, they just, they made a mockery out of it, and she didn't help anything, I mean,
right,
like an inch and a half from being legally retarded.
I think they really overplayed that when it came about.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I think they overplayed that when it came about because nobody really knows it. And I kind of wonder, I mean, I know that area fairly well. I'm kind of wondering where exactly they were with their motorhome where they would have seen something like that. I mean, the only highway is Highway 101 of the coast, and it's right on the coast. You've got to have a four-wheel drive pretty much to go in the interior of that area. And I've been through that country a number of times, so it's a lot of country. It's big country. So you'd have to ask the question, number one, why were they there if they were out in that area? Now, I can see them being on Highway 101. They can't say they're on I-5 because that's a long ways east from that area. You've got to be in a place where Sasquatch is out. Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I don't remember all the particulars, where they were, what they were doing. They were partying after a shoot.
I'm not sure why they'd be way up there.
I mean, at least, what she saw, she thought was real. But they just had I don't know if it was Conan or whatever, one of those. They just had a field day with her, typical blonde, and ripped her up and down and, made a mockery of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was legitimate or not. If it was, they broke it down to make people think it wasn't. And if it wasn't, well, I mean, it didn't get a lot of traction. It did at times. Some of these things get traction at the moment. They're just kind of the flash in the pan and then they're gone. And again, that goes back to, when we have a situation, we have to have our people in the field really digging and doing the footwork to gather all the information that's pertinent to support, those encounters. Because without it, they're just stories. I mean, they might have, all the right particulars that go along with those stories, but without the supporting evidence, they really don't mean much except being stories. Well, any last words, fellas?
No, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to download these.
What was that, Joe?
I just want to know if you have talked to PW or not.
He's busy with his classwork right now, so I got a text from him earlier, but we haven't talked. All right, fellas. Well, we'll wrap it up for this week. Everybody be sure to check out the website, williamjevning.com. We're always looking for new people to join the Jevning Research Group everywhere in the country, Canada. We have our growing team in Australia. Now we have more members with that, so I'm really interested, excited to see what they're going to find. And, of course, we have teams in England and Norway also. So, Don, I don't know if you've heard from Jeremiah or not. Let me know if you have. He should be back fairly soon. Also, check out our Facebook page, the GRG Bigfoot Research Group. I think we're almost 700 members here now, so I'm really happy to see that. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next week. Sasquatch encounters last more than just a couple of minutes. So in that short of amount of time, you're taking all this information in, then you try to make sense of it. And you're exactly right, Brian. If they might see, one person might see one thing, the next person might see something else, a third person might see something yet again, but they're all looking at the same thing.
Right.
I couldn't imagine how my mind would even process something like that. I wouldn't even begin until it ever did happen.
The only thing that went through my mind was, oh shit. That's it. You walk in on something like that and it's like, holy crap. I mean, everything stops. It comes to an absolute standstill. I mean, it seems like time freezes. It doesn't really, you know, where Brian, you brought that up about, you know, people saying they have missing time. Well, that's horse crap. I mean, I think for the most part, it's a perceptual thing. It seems like it. I mean, and time may actually perceptually slow down a little bit, but it's just because you're in kind of a state of shock in a way, because that encounter assaults your system. You're thinking everything you think you know comes to a grinding halt all of a sudden, and you know, in my case, you know, I was kind of frozen, and then what got me going was actually the other one coming around from behind me. That sort of, I don't know how if I would have stood there longer had that one not. I probably would have a little bit longer, but since the other one came around from behind me, that kind of shocked me into saying, you know, to myself, I need to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, just like, you know, I keep referring back to Ryan Gosling there.
Yeah.
Same thing. He said a million things went through. I mean, here's a trained police officer. And he said a million things went through my mind. He said, when you see your life flashes, he goes, it just happened so fast, and your mind can't comprehend when you're something that's not supposed to exist is standing in front of you, you know, 10, 15 feet away, and
you don't know how to react to it.
You can't take it in like that, you know. You just can't wrap your head around something like that. I can only imagine. I can't imagine, you know.
I'm going to show Joe I got to show you this real quick. I had these made, or this one. This is a prototype. This is the front pocket. These T-shirts.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I like that.
So as I'm able to, this is the prototype. I'm going to have those made for our members. So
okay.
I had to show that to you, though.
I like that. I'll get one for sure.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it really is a perceptual thing, and it kind of goes along. He looked very human to her. Well, Bobby was a nurse, so you know, maybe that tells me that either that was the way she perceived it, you know, maybe read a little too much into it, or she was seeing the type 4 that is closer to humans physically, you know, in terms of you know, the particulars. They don't have hair in their face, things like that. Their arms are more proportionate to humans than the other 3 types are, things like that. So it was one of those 2 things. Now, I can tell you, Lindsay, I don't know if he's on here listening or not, but Lindsay, one of our members in Canada, is a big game hunter. He actually had one of these things in these sites. Now, Lindsay has some very expensive equipment. He has a gun sight that also acts as a camera. He didn't film the one he had in his sights, but he saw it very clearly, and he says, no, it did not look human to him. So I think it's a lot of times it's a matter of how that person interprets what it is they see, you know, in terms of how they describe it. So,
yeah, getting back to these silly shows that you're talking about, and podcasts, and you know, and YouTube videos and all that.
Oh yeah.
When I'll be sitting there listening to something, and you know, it's got me interested for the first 5-10 minutes.
Right.
And then as soon as it shifts and we're off to the next dimension,
off to La La Land somewhere.
You know, it just, you know, I mean, that's when you just lose it, and you know, time to turn the channel. And when you do get a show on, you know, they pick the most ridiculous people, and I shouldn't say ridiculous, but you know, the most far-fetched, and it's almost like they're trying to make a mockery out of it. You know, their goal is, you know, that the people producing the show don't believe it's real, so they have no intention in making a wholehearted attempt to make the topic look real. So you have these people that they come in, like you said, Billy Bob out there, and they got, you know, there's 4 of them, and they got 2 teeth between them, and it's just, you know, it's just crazy, you know, and then you try to sit there and you watch it with someone who you're trying to get interested in the topic, and they just can't get past the hillbillies or the nonsense of it all, you know. I mean, not even just hillbillies, but it's just, you know, there's not a really good approach to, you know, to the subject without making a mockery somehow of it.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely correct. That's been my experience with
the involved in this, who knows that they exist,
right.
But it's still going to take for the average American, or average citizen, even American, but average citizen, they're going to want something more than just a piece of paper saying confirmed DNA.
They're going to want one on the slab, absolutely. And I know there's people that'll go kicking and screaming about that, but that's the reality. And like our anthropologist Mark Dobbs said, he said that's the way science and scientists do things. It's not just not out of the question. It's a matter of regular practice. He says taking a member of a species, like this, is something they routinely do. So I don't see the scientific community having a problem with it. And I think if we were able to accomplish that, I don't think we'd have to worry much about it, because the scientific community would be all over it, and of course they would support that.
And of course, I'm not suggesting some kind of mass cover-up necessarily, but
right.
there's economic reasons why those in power wouldn't want those things exposed, right? Because it would have tremendous effect on the forestry industry and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean we could go down that whole train of thought too. There's with the Endangered Species Act. Of course, the Endangered Species Act would kick in automatically once the scientific community recognized there being something out there, then immediately. And it's not something that they have to go out and do it. It's an automatic thing. It happens automatically. And of course, they spend years putting their panel of experts, all these various experts together to do the study and figure out the impacts and on the environment, and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it would be years. But then the economic impact, like you say, if it were logging, or even in terms of recreational use of these regions where these things are, they may have to shut a lot of that land down, because it would be such a major find that they would have to shut everything down just to figure this all out. And of course, I know they already know this stuff, but publicly they would have to go through all these, jump through all these hoops for the public benefit and everything. And it's probably would be more designed to kind of readjust where things are, so people aren't out running around and becoming Happy Meals. And that's another thing too. I mean, if it came about where, it was shown that they did know about this stuff, and a lot of people are taken by these things, it's a big liability issue. So, and that's one of the reasons that I would never give my sources away, because I think they're doing an important job with that. They have a lot on their shoulders, and they're really not in control with it. Quality work, if we adopt some of the methodology that criminologists use when they go on site, then what we collect can be passed on. We sort of have a much better chain of custody, if you will, from information being collected by people in the field going to our scientists, who can actually do something with that, as opposed to, say, somebody going out and say, well, I've seen this in the field myself. Somebody that goes along with our teams, a prospective member, and I can think of someone very specifically back in the 90s from Portland, Oregon, who created a Bigfoot called Blader, going up and picking hair off trees with its hands and stuffing it in his pocket like this. Well, any integrity of the data is gone right there. So, Bruce says, go ahead.
I can tell you, even from a different perspective. Now, I'm from upstate New York. Mm-hmm. We're right in the foothills of the Adirondacks.
You're up with Jeremiah.
Yeah, not as far as him. He's up. I'm to the south of he's in the northern Adirondacks, where I'd be down in the southern. We're about 25 miles northwest of Albany.
Okay.
And I recently got acquainted with Brian Gosselin from Whitehall fame, the Whitehall case, the famous Whitehall case back in the 70s. And he was one of the policemen that were on duty in the heart of all that, that big scene back then. and I got to spend a weekend with him actually, and listening to his story. And they had Finding Bigfoot, and they had, you know, other oh geez, it might have been Monster Quest, I'm not sure. A couple of them they had him on, and he even said how by the time it was done, I mean, they had him looking like a 1930s cop. Portrayed him. He goes, I walked out there looking like Barney Fife.
Oh,
that's
Lord.
just what he said. I mean,
yeah.
And then now here's the guy. You know what I mean? You know that his story hasn't wavered in 40 years. You know, 76. Yeah. So, you know, and he tells the story the same as it is. You know, went down and back in those days. And, you know, he's just basically left him with a bad taste in his mouth about the whole thing. You know, I mean, there's a humble guy, and, you know, who's, you know, just tells his story to anyone who will listen, you know, and it even, you know, just he felt it made him look foolish, you know, and all he did was, you know, retell his story, but they jazzed it up to the point where it looked ridiculous.
Mr. Black or something, that for every one person that does come forward, there's probably at least 5 that don't.
Oh,
something like that, because they don't want to look stupid.
From my own field work, when we were doing a lot of the investigation of the South Mount St. Helens area from 1986 through 98, I talked to a lot of folks in that region during those years, and I easily estimated that probably for every one person there were at least 10 people that had encounters that would never talk about them. And that was a lot of times from witnesses. You know, I'd get a witness and they knew of so many people, you know, in those local areas that had seen things, like the Yackle area, for instance. There were many, I'd say many dozens of people. I couldn't even give you a number. There were so many people that I did talk to who knew many more people who had seen things that would never talk about it. I couldn't even begin to approach them.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was because the silliness factor. You know, they would see a few things, and back in those days, it was primarily newspaper. So if they thought they were going to, you know, have to endure some kind of ridicule, they simply wouldn't talk about it. It was easier just to not deal with it.
Yeah, especially if you're an authority figure like a police officer. I mean, you definitely can't say anything because your job could be on the line. Right?
Oh, absolutely. When I met Mark Pittenger, the state trooper, back in 1975, you know, he was a pretty tough cop, and he was really given a lot of crap by his coworkers, you know, fellow state troopers over all that. But, you know, him being the guy that he was, you know, he dealt with it. He didn't like it, but he dealt with it, but because he knew what he saw. You know, so
it was like Whitehall, you know, talking with Brian Goslin, the Whitehall incident up there. They local Whitehall police, they had New York state troopers. There was a deputy, it might have been as well. Well, when it was all said and done, the trooper that he was out in the field with, the incident took place, and he says to him, he goes, now tell me what you saw. And the state trooper goes, I didn't say nothing. I didn't see a thing. And his hand was shaking like a leaf to say anything.
Right.
Well, about a week or so after it all kind of calmed down, they by upper management and the sheriff's department there, going to squash this, and you don't say any more about it. You know, don't even bring it up. If questions are asked, deter the questions the best you can. Don't even
support their own way of thinking instead of, you know, what will logically lead us to what these things actually are. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, and Will, on that note too, I think that like that a lot of times some of these people like really are sincere and they're just kind of fitting to like what they see into their own beliefs, and then other times we know that they're just out to make money, right? They're just making these stories up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sell books and like things like that, you know, with these crazy like extraterrestrial theories and stuff like that, you know.
Oh yeah, the mind speaking and all that crazy stuff. That stuff really dry. You know, when we first came on, we were talking about the news, and Scott, I don't know if you heard, I'm going to be going on It's actually Art Bell's show on the 13th of July here. He doesn't do the show now. He's actually coaching his producer. She's doing the show, Heather Wade. He is actually, she was telling me, I heard from her some time ago, and then she said around December, somebody been around Art's home actually shooting at his home. And he caught somebody outside the home one night, and there's just a series of things going on. So he actually got fairly frightened by all this stuff, and he decided to back away from doing the show himself. So now he's coaching his producer to do the show. But anyway, I'm going on that show for 3 hours that evening, and we had actually a very long conversation the other day, and she is one of the bright spots when it comes to, you know, media producers / hosts that aren't interested in all this nonsensical approach to anything that I hate to use the term Bigfoot and paranormal, but in some of these, I guess you'd say, esoteric subjects, she's interested in taking a nuts and bolts approach to them and getting away from all this nonsense. So, which kind of bugs me with the media sometimes because, and I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, a producer from the Sci-Fi Channel contacted me and wanted me to do a show that was called, and it was a short-lived show, it was called Joe Rogan Questions Everything. So, and I, you know, after chatting with him, I agreed, and they flew me down to Burbank. And it was funny because they told me how to dress. You know, I thought I was going to be in a studio being questioned, you know, so I dressed appropriately for that. Similar, you know, in kind of a suit and everything like I did for America's Book of Secrets. Well, instead of that, they drove me out to the Angeles mountain ranges, and it was hot and dusty out in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, I'm peeling clothes off as we're going out there, and nobody seemed to be coordinated. Then Joe Rogan wanted to take a hike with the whole crew down through this wooded area. You know, for an appropriate backdrop. The link is ready and everything. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's a lot of exposure. They have a lot of affiliates. You know, that's, of course, regular. And I think they're satellite radio, too. So, you know, Art Bell did AM Coast to Coast for many years. And he was always my favorite talk show host. So I remember being at work at night. I worked graveyard in the mid-'90s. And used to listen to his show every night. So, Bruce asking, where are things at with ladies having vocalizations here in the Pacific Northwest? I believe Milo was on the case. Yeah, Milo has been over there working. In fact, I was waiting to see if Milo was going to come on tonight. Haven't heard from him. So he was going to be going over to Brandy's. That's her name. Apparently where the bedding sites are, they keep getting bigger, so there's a lot more activity going on there. I know she's been doing a lot more recording of vocals, so I'm kind of waiting to hear what's going on with that investigation. Our team in Northern Washington is out looking into some recent stuff going on there too. So, you know, I'm kind of sitting waiting to hear from the teams. You know, they're in active investigations right now, so and actually, they're a little bit worried on that one with Brandy because the Sasquatches have been coming up closer and closer to the house, and they've been a little concerned with that because they're getting so bold. And I gave them some tips, things to do to get them to sort of keep at bay, and they've been implementing those. So mostly right now with the motion sensor lights and things like that, and cutting the brush back away from the house. So hopefully we'll get some updates on that. So anything that new, you know, we're supposed to be talking about, and I wanted to bring the subject up. I get some strange messages from people once in a while. Some are good, some aren't good, some are helpful, some aren't. And what prompted tonight's discussion was one of these. There was a person who some people are almost insistent because they think they figured out what Bigfoot is, you know, and I get occasionally, it's not a lot, thankfully it's not a lot, once in a great while I'll get somebody who'll email me and they'll say, I know what Bigfoot is, then they'll start doing things like quoting you know, biblical scripture and things like that, and I think in their minds, they may have figured out the mystery, but in reality, that's little or no help. So, when we talk about, when I put the show title, Bigfoot is what with a question mark. Bruce says,
I can,
go ahead.
I can tell you, even from a different perspective. Now, I'm from upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
We're right in the foothills of the Adirondacks.
You're up with Jeremiah.
Yeah, not as far as him. He's up. I'm to the south of he's in the northern Adirondacks, where I'd be down in the southern. We're about 25 miles northwest of Albany.
Okay.
And I recently got acquainted with Brian Gosselin from Whitehall fame, the Whitehall case, the famous Whitehall case back in the 70s. Sure. And he was one of the policemen that were on duty in the heart of all that, that big scene back then. And I got to spend a weekend with him, actually, and listening to his story. And they had Finding Bigfoot, and they had, other, it might have been Monster Quest. I'm not sure. A couple of them, they had him on. And he even said how by the time it was done, I mean, they had him looking like a 1930s cop, portrayed him. He goes, I walked out there looking like Barney Fife.
Oh,
that's
Lord.
just what he said. I mean,
yeah.
And then now here's the guy, you know what I mean? That his story hasn't wavered in 40 years, 76. Yeah. So, and he tells the story the same as it is, it went down and, back in those days. And, he's just basically left him with a bad taste in his mouth about the whole thing. There's a humble guy and, who's, just tells his story to anyone who will listen, and it even, he felt it made him look foolish, and all he did was, retell his story, but they jazzed it up to the point where it looked ridiculous.
And I think a lot of times that is done on purpose.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it keeps a lot of witnesses quiet.
Well, it does, because it just, intentionally ruining your reputation, for whatever, and like you said, if they made him look like that, and I hadn't encountered, do I even out there and put my reputation on the line, and look like a flaming idiot?
Yeah,
as well,
absolutely.
Because if these quote Bigfoot shows that are so dedicated to the topic are going to make him look like that, it's just it's kind of disheartening, really.
I ran into that with newspapers years ago. We'll get some updates on that. So anything that new, we're supposed to be talking about, and I wanted to bring the subject up. I get some strange messages from people once in a while. Some are good, some aren't good, some are helpful, some aren't. And what prompted tonight's discussion was one of these. There was a person who some people are almost insistent because they think they figured out what Bigfoot is, and I get occasionally, it's not a lot, thankfully it's not a lot, once in a great while I'll get somebody who'll email me and they'll say, I know what Bigfoot is, and they'll start doing things like quoting biblical scripture and things like that, and I think in their minds they may have figured out the mystery, but in reality that's little or no help. So when we talk about, when I put the show title, Bigfoot is what with a question mark, these people are implying that they're either, some sort of,
extraterrestrial
extraterrestrial or pre-creation by God, of humans or some other thing, instead of just looking at the most simplistic, simple is good. The old saying, the old KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. That's usually the best way or the most accurate in terms of explaining what something is. And I did a bunch of work today. I was looking at all this stuff. I printed all this stuff out about how animals are classified and how they're grouped. And I was actually hoping to get a couple of the professionals that are part of our group, to talk to me about this, but they're really busy right now, all the people we have. So I lucked out on that one by not getting, I guess, the input. But so I went and did a little research to be certain that I was right on track with this. And people need to understand that when an animal is classified into a major grouping, and of course, there's the major groupings. And I'll just, there's seven areas that let me see. Just in classifying animals, science puts every living thing into 7 major groupings, and from largest to smallest, it goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And when it comes to things like primates, and I've heard people, exactly, Bruce says, unfortunately, some people just keep it stupid. Yeah, I mean, that's right. But when classifying something, just on that show, and it goes from around 9:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. So we're gonna spend 3 hours talking Bigfoot. So that'll be a lot of fun. And of course, David's gonna post it on the website, and I'll announce it, beforehand. Once the link is ready and everything. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's a lot of exposure. They have a lot of affiliates. That's of course regular, and I think they're satellite radio too. So Art Bell did AM Coast to Coast for many years, and he was always my favorite talk show host. So I remember being at work at night. I worked graveyard in the mid 90s and used to listen to his show every night. So Bruce asking, where are things at with ladies having vocalizations here in the Pacific Northwest? I believe Milo was on the case. Yeah, Milo has been over there working. In fact, I was waiting to see if Milo was going to come on tonight. Haven't heard from him. So he was going to be going over to Brandy's. That's her name. Apparently where the bedding sites are, they keep getting bigger. So there's a lot more activity going on there. I know she's been doing a lot more recording of vocals. So I'm kind of waiting to hear what's going on with that investigation. Our team in Northern Washington is out looking into some recent stuff going on there too. So, I'm kind of sitting waiting to hear from the teams. They're in active investigations right now. So, and actually they're a little bit worried on that one with Brandy because the Sasquatches have been coming up closer and closer to the house, and they've been a little concerned with that because they're getting so bold. And I gave them some tips, things to do to get them to sort of keep at bay, and they've been implementing those. So mostly right now with the motion sensor lights and things like that, and cutting the brush back away from the house. So hopefully we'll get some updates on that. So anything that new, we're supposed to be talking about, and I wanted to bring the subject up. I get some strange messages from people once in a while. Some are good, some aren't good, some are helpful, some aren't. And what prompted tonight's discussion was one of these. There was a person who some people are almost insistent because they think they figured out what Bigfoot is, and I get occasionally, it's not a lot, thankfully it's not a lot. Once in a great while, I'll get somebody who'll email me and they'll say, I know what Bigfoot is. Then they'll start doing things like quoting, biblical scripture and things like that. And
when they were in the redwoods and out there,
I remember when that happened
in front of their bus there, and they actually videotaped the fleeting glance. I mean, now to me, in her mind, they and the people that were there really believed it was something. But
right.
the talk show hosts, I mean, they just, they made a mockery out of it. And she didn't help anything, I mean,
right.
Like an inch and a half from being legally retarded.
I think they really overplayed that when
they
it
made
came
it look
about.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I think they overplayed that when it came about because nobody really knows it. And I kind of wonder, I mean, I know that area fairly well. I'm kind of wondering where exactly they were with their motorhome where they would have seen something like that. I mean, the only highway is Highway 101 up the coast, and it's right on the coast. You've got to have a 4-wheel drive pretty much to go in the interior of that area. And I've been through that country a number of times. So it's a lot of country. It's big country. So you'd have to ask the question, number one, why were they there if they were out in that area? Now, I can see them being on Highway 101. They can't say they're on I-5 because that's a long ways east from that area. You've got to be in a place where Sasquatch is out. Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You know, I don't remember all the particulars, you know, where they were, what they were doing. They were partying after a shoot.
I'm not sure why they'd be way up there.
You know, I mean, at least, you know, what she saw, she thought was, you know, was real. But they just had I don't know if it was Conan or whatever, one of those. They just had a field day with her, you know, typical blonde, and ripped her up and down and, you know, made a mockery of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was legitimate or not. If it was, they broke it down to make people think it wasn't. And if it wasn't, well, I mean, it didn't get a lot of traction. And it did at times. Some of these things get traction at the moment. You know, they're just kind of the flash in the pan and then they're gone. And again, that goes back to, you know, when we have a situation, you know, we have to have our people in the field really digging and doing the footwork to gather all the information that's pertinent to support, you know, those encounters. Because without it, they're just stories. I mean, they might have, you know, all the right particulars that go along with those stories, but without the supporting evidence, they really don't mean much except being stories. Well, any last words, fellas?
No, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to download and
What was that, Joe?
I just want to know if you had talked to PW or not.
At a place where they made laminate beams, and that lasted, you know, a few months, and then the last few years of his life, he worked guarding logging equipment for a company and actually got a pension from that. But, you know, was living in a trailer on site, so that was Charlie. He lived out in the forest, and he lived off the forest. So during that time period, from actually he lived with a woman in a house that was rented from Burlington Northern we had a 99-year lease on this little cabin out in the middle of nowhere, and he would tap into the power lines. Charlie only had an 8th grade education, but he was a genius. He knew how to do things. He was able to tap into the Puget Power electric lines, and they could never figure out where the power was going. They could never figure out how he was doing it. You know, he'd see a truck coming in, you know, or whatever, and he would disconnect whatever line he had, and then when they were gone, he'd go hook it back up. But they were unable to trace how he did that. So when this incident with the elk happened, he told me, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a fishing game official that he knew from the area that came to visit him up this road. And he lived way out the end of this road near the town of Wilkeson. So the guy asked him, he says, well, have you heard any strange animal noises up here lately, any screams or anything? And immediately, because of, you know, knowing me and what I had seen and stuff, and by this time, you know, I was pretty well involved in the subject, he played dumb just to see what the guy would tell him. And the guy told him, he says, there were some mushroom pickers up on the flats that had found a couple elk that were torn apart. And he showed him, he already had a copy of the written report. And he said in the written report, it said that they were dismembered without the use of tools. And then this official told him, he says, look, he says, you can't talk about this to anybody. If you do, Puget Power is going to find out where their electricity has been going. He says, you catch my meaning. And, you know, of course, it could have landed him in jail and all this stuff. So that was a pretty open threat to keep his mouth shut about what happened. And in the report, it mentioned the word Bigfoot and things like that. So they knew exactly what it was. Then the guy left. So Charlie never had a phone. other than the last time I remember, like I said, it was in the 1960s. So for him to go find a phone and to try to call me, and in those days it was a crapshoot trying to get me because I was stationed in Fort Lewis, and I just happened to be at my parents' house that particular evening. So he called there, I guess, trying to find out how to get a hold of me, and I was there, so I answered the phone, and Bruce asking where are things at with the lady who's having vocalizations here in the Pacific Northwest. I believe Milo was on the case. Yeah, Milo has been over there working. In fact, I was waiting to see if Milo was going to come on tonight. Haven't heard from him. So he was going to be going over to Brandy's. That's her name. Apparently where the bedding sites are, they keep getting bigger. So there's a lot more activity going on there. I know she's been doing a lot more recording of vocals. So I'm kind of waiting to hear what's going on with that investigation. Our team in Northern Washington is out looking into some recent stuff going on there too. So, I'm kind of sitting waiting to hear from the teams. They're in active investigations right now. So, and actually they're a little bit worried on that one with Brandy because the Sasquatches have been coming up closer and closer to the house, and they've been a little concerned with that because they're getting so bold. And I gave them some tips, things to do to get them to sort of keep at bay, and they've been implementing those. So mostly right now with the motion sensor lights and things like that, and cutting the brush back away from the house. So hopefully we'll get some updates on that. So anything that new, we're supposed to be talking about, and I wanted to bring the subject up. I get some strange messages from people once in a while. Some are good, some aren't good, some are helpful, some aren't. And what prompted tonight's discussion was one of these. There was a person who some people are almost insistent because they think they figured out what Bigfoot is, and I get occasionally, it's not a lot, thankfully it's not a lot. Once in a great while, I'll get somebody who'll email me and they'll say, I know what Bigfoot is. Then they'll start doing things like quoting, biblical scripture and things like that. And I think in their minds, they may have figured out the mystery, but in reality, that's little or no help. So, when we talk about, when I put the show title, Bigfoot is what with a question mark, these people are implying that they're either, some sort of,
extraterrestrial or
extraterrestrial or pre-creation by God, of humans or some other thing, instead of just looking at the most simplistic, simple is good. The old saying, the old KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. That's usually the best way or the most accurate in terms of explaining what something is. And I did a bunch of information being collected by people in the field going to our scientists who can actually do something with that, as opposed to say somebody going out and say, well, I've seen this in the field myself. Somebody that goes along with our teams, a prospective member, and I can think of someone very specifically back in the 90s from Portland, Oregon, who created a Bigfoot called Blader, going up and picking hair off trees with his hands and stuffing it in his pocket like this. Well, any integrity of the data is gone right there. So, Bruce says,
I can,
go ahead.
I can tell you, even from a different perspective. Now, I'm from upstate New York. Mm-hmm. We're right in the foothills of the Adirondacks.
You're up with Jeremiah.
Yeah, not as far as him. He's up. I'm to the south of he's in the northern Adirondacks, where I'd be down in the southern. We're about 25 miles northwest of Albany.
Okay.
And I recently got acquainted with Brian Gosselin from Whitehall fame, the Whitehall case, the famous Whitehall case back in the 70s. And he was one of the policemen that were on duty in the heart of all that, that big scene back then. And I got to spend a a weekend with him actually, and listening to his story. And they had Finding Bigfoot, and they had, you know, other oh geez, it might have been Monster Quest, I'm not sure. A couple of them they had him on. And he even said how by the time it was done, I mean, they had him looking like a 1930s cop. Portrayed him. He goes, I walked out there looking like Barney Fife.
Oh,
that's
Lord.
just what he said. I mean,
yeah.
And then now here's the guy, you know what I mean? You know, that his story hasn't wavered in 40 years, you know, 76. Yeah. So, you know, and he tells the story the same as it is, you know, went down and, you know, back in those days. And, you know, he's just basically left him with a bad taste in his mouth about the whole thing. You know, I mean, there's a humble guy, and, you know, who's, you know, just tells his story to anyone who will listen, you know, and it even, you know, just he felt it made him look foolish, you know, and all he did was, you know, retell his story, but they jazzed it up to the point where it looked ridiculous.
And I think a lot of times that is done on purpose. You know, and
absolutely.
And it keeps a lot of witnesses quiet.
Well, it does, because it just, you know.
So
Okay.
I had to show that to you, though.
I like it. I'll get one for sure.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it really is a perceptual thing, and it kind of goes along with this whole thing. You know, the topic of you know what a Sasquatch is. You know, where people think that they're, you know, something from biblical times or allegories or whatever, and it's all a matter of perception. And like was brought up earlier, Bruce brought up people anthropomorphize animals. In other words, it's, you know, we place human traits and characteristics on non-human species. That's the definition of it. You know, and everybody, you know, they're used to doing it to their dogs and cats and birds and things like that. So, you know, when they do it to a Sasquatch, I guess we should expect it, but it's really misplaced, you know, opinions, and a lot of these are nothing but opinions that are out there.
Right. So the people out there that are, you know, the fuzzy forest people, you know, and they wanna cohabitate with them and all this crap. I mean, they would. I mean, if it was a 600-pound grizzly bear standing in your backyard, you wouldn't be baking it a pie. So why would?
Hello, exactly, and that's just like
it, you know,
and
I
that's
mean,
what. Yeah, that's what happened to the guys.
I just don't understand, because they look somewhat human. You know, they have a few characteristics because they walk on two legs. Well, that doesn't mean that you have them over for dinner.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the point, you know, that I've been trying to make to people is, you know, just because they remotely resemble us, and I mean remotely, because they don't, and all these people that want to call them human, there is nothing human about them. Because they stand up and walk on two legs, that doesn't make you a human being. You know, there's all the physical characteristics put them far closer, you know, to an ape genus than they do what we are. We're something very unusual when it comes to primates. These things are much more closely resemble both, you know, living and extinct species of other non-human primates. So why people want to keep placing, you know, these silly ideals on these creatures when they don't fit that paradigm at all.
Yeah, you know, then the thing about them being friendly and wanting to go out there and pet them, basically. You know, you look on YouTube, you can see where bears walk right by a person.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't mean that bear says, "Hey, come follow me." You know.
No.
Let's go play in the forest. You know?
Well, and even in places like Yellowstone, they had to bar people from feeding bears, because then they'd start expecting the food and tearing